A simple stone arch once held the power to build empires. During the Bronze Age, forgotten bridges became the secret engines of the first global economy, moving the essential metals and ideas that defined an era. You will learn how these overlooked structures were the true lifelines of ancient trade, completely reshaping your understanding of early civilization. How did a bridge determine the fate of a city? What engineering secrets allowed them to last for millennia? The answers reveal a lost world of connection. What do you believe is the most important legacy of our ancient past? That caravan's journey and thousands like it hinged on a single critical moment at the river's edge. The success of an entire trading season, the wealth of a city, even the supply of bronze for an army's weapons, all could be lost to a swollen current or a capsized raft. This was the daily reality of Bronze Age commerce. The creation of bronze itself demanded a logistical miracle. Copper deposits were found in specific, often remote, mountainous regions like those on Cyprus. Tin, even rarer, had to be sourced from distant lands, possibly as far away as modern-day Afghanistan or Cornwall in Britain. To bring these two isolated raw materials together required a network of overland routes spanning continents. Think of the sheer weight and bulk of the ingots being transported. A single ox cart could only carry so much, and every unfordable river meant a dangerous, time-consuming transfer to a ferry, if one existed at all. These natural barriers were the choke points of the ancient economy. A simple ford, a place where the water was shallow enough to cross, was only usable in the dry season. A ferry was better, but it was slow, its capacity limited, and it was useless if the river was frozen or flooding. As the demand for metal grew insatiable, these temporary solutions became glaringly inadequate. The pressure for a permanent, all-weather solution became immense. This necessity, born from the relentless flow of trade, is what pushed human ingenuity to its limits and sparked the evolution from finding a crossing to building one. It was this transition that would lead to the first great stone bridges, structures designed not just to span a gap, but to bear the weight of empires. The solution to this ancient logistical nightmare began with a simple, powerful principle. Artisans carefully stacked stones, each layer projecting slightly inward until they met at the top. This technique, known as corbelling, gave birth to some of the earliest bridges. It was a brilliant innovation that required no mortar or complex keystones. Instead, it relied on precise stone cutting and the unyielding force of gravity to create a stable arch. One of the most famous survivors of this method is the Archaeological Bridge in Greece, a Mycenaean structure that still stands firm after more than 3,000 years. Its enduring presence is a testament to the sheer durability of this foundational design. These early engineers built with locally sourced limestone or basalt, materials chosen for their ability to withstand both the elements and the immense weight of passing caravans. They calculated loads and spans not with complex formulas, but through an intuitive understanding of physics, knowledge that was passed down through generations of apprenticeships. The success of the Corbel Arch proved that humanity could permanently conquer geographic divides with nothing more than ingenuity and stone. This was the foundational technology, the first great leap, that would soon be adapted and refined across the ancient world. But as trade routes expanded and the weight of commerce grew, even this remarkable invention would be pushed to its limits, demanding a new, even more resilient solution. The Corbel Arch was a brilliant start, but it was the land itself that decided where these structures would rise. Picture a Bronze Age surveyor standing on a high bluff, his eyes scanning a river valley below. He was not looking for just any spot. His goal was to find the perfect location, a place where nature had already done most of the work. He sought a narrow gap between stable, rocky banks, a point where the river's flow was calmer and the crossing would be shortest. Every decision was a calculated balance between the immense difficulty of construction and the relentless demand for trade efficiency. The width of the river, the depth of the water, the speed of the current, and the solidity of the ground on either side, these were the critical factors that dictated success or failure. In the sprawling flatlands of Mesopotamia, this logic centered on the great cities. Bridges naturally emerged near urban centers like Ur and Babylon, becoming fixed points in the vast, watery networks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These were not just local crossings, they were the vital hubs where local farm produce met the long-distance caravans carrying lapis lazuli and tin. On the island of Crete, the Minoans faced a different geographical reality. Their bridges were designed as direct links, sturdy stone pathways connecting their ornate palaces to bustling harbors. This ensured that precious goods like exquisite pottery and large jars of olive oil could move swiftly from inland workshops to waiting trade ships. Meanwhile, in the rugged highlands of Anatolia, engineers confronted a more violent landscape. Here, bridges had to be designed for steep mountain trails and withstand the torrential, seasonal floods that could wipe out a less robust structure in moments. This deep understanding of the lay of the land allowed ancient planners to turn topographical challenges into strategic advantages. A well-placed bridge did not just cross a river, it could control an entire valley, binding scattered settlements into a cohesive and powerful economic region. The location was everything, transforming a simple arch of stone into the beating heart of a trade network. A simple stone bridge could transform a quiet village into a capital. When a permanent crossing was established, it did far more than connect two riverbanks. It created a powerful economic vortex. People, goods, and ideas were drawn to that point of reliable passage, and a settlement would begin to swell. The Hittite capital of Hattusa offers a perfect example of this phenomenon. Its strategic location was not an accident of geography, but a deliberate choice centered on vital river crossings. These bridges were the city's lifelines, connecting it directly to the distant tin mines of Anatolia and to the allied kingdoms that supplied its armies. With these secure routes in place, Hattusa blossomed. Artisans who could work the imported bronze set up workshops. Traders established permanent stalls. Scribes and administrators arrived to manage the flow of commerce and taxation. A vibrant market district would inevitably spring up at the bridgehead, a natural meeting point for local farmers and international merchants. This was not a slow, organic growth. It was an explosive concentration of human activity, all fueled by the certainty that the bridge provided. Soon, supporting infrastructure appeared. Sturdy warehouses were built to store goods awaiting transport. Guard posts were established to protect the valuable cargo moving across the span. What was once a modest town became a fortified, international metropolis, a key player in trade networks stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Levant. This growth created a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle. As the city grew richer and more powerful, it invested more in the bridge that made it all possible. Maintenance became a priority, and defenses were strengthened to protect this vital artery. The bridge built the city, and the city, in turn, fortified the bridge. This symbiotic relationship highlights the true power of these structures. They were not passive monuments, but active engines of civilization, concentrating human potential and forging the very empires that would dominate the Bronze Age world. The Hittites transformed rugged terrain into a controlled web of commerce and command. In the demanding highlands of Anatolia, their engineers did not just build bridges, they built instruments of power. These structures were meticulously placed near mountain passes and river gorges, the natural choke points of the ancient world. Here, a single stone arch could regulate the flow of everything from silver and textiles to entire armies. The Hittites, famous for their detailed legal codes and administrative genius, understood that a reliable bridge was more valuable than a regiment of soldiers. It allowed their legendary chariots to move with speed and precision, projecting military force to the farthest corners of their empire. But these bridges also served a deeper economic purpose. They connected the great capital of Hattusa directly to remote mining districts, ensuring a constant, secure supply of the copper and tin needed to forge the bronze that armed their troops and supplied their artisans. What good was a rich tin mine if its treasure could not reach the forgers? The Hittite answer was to build a road to it and to bridge every river in between. Remains of their work, massive stone abutments and carefully graded approach roads, speak to a philosophy of pure durability. These were not graceful ornaments, they were workhorses designed to bear immense loads season after season. They had to withstand the violent spring floods that could tear a lesser structure apart, and they had to remain open even during times of conflict, a testament to their strategic importance. This mastery over geography gave the Hittites a decisive edge. It allowed them to trade as equals with the superpowers of their day, exchanging Anatolian silver for luxury goods from Assyria and Egypt. Their entire imperial system, from law to logistics, was built upon the simple, unshakable foundation of a well-built bridge. This raises a compelling question: how did other great powers of the era tackle the same challenge? The Mycenaeans understood that a kingdom's wealth flowed along its roads. A merchant's journey did not end at the palace gates. It began there, with his cart laden with fine pottery and sealed jars of olive oil, all destined for a waiting ship at a distant port. To reach the coast, his route was secured by sturdy stone bridges, the vital connectors that linked powerful inland centers like Mycenae and Turin to harbors such as Pylos. These crossings were the final, crucial link in a supply chain that stretched across the entire Mediterranean. The Archaeological Bridge, still standing after more than 3 millennia, is a perfect monument to this system. It was not an isolated structure but a single component in an extensive, state-managed road network. Built from massive limestone blocks using the corbel arch technique, its design was brutally practical, engineered to withstand the relentless weight of ox carts and the region's frequent earthquakes. The importance of this infrastructure is etched into clay. Linear B tablets, the administrative records of the Mycenaean palaces, detail specific allocations of materials and labor for the upkeep of roads and bridges. This was not casual maintenance, it was a calculated state investment. A broken bridge meant a broken trade route, and the palatial economy could not tolerate such a failure. The system worked with remarkable efficiency. Across these stone arches traveled the raw materials of civilization and the luxuries that defined its elite. Amber from the distant Baltic and exquisite ivory from the Near East flowed inland, while locally produced goods flowed out to the wider world. This constant exchange did more than fill royal treasuries. It integrated Mycenaean culture into a vibrant international community, bringing new ideas and artistic influences back to the Greek mainland. The very complexity of their society, with its centralized administration and specialized artisans, was built upon the simple, unshakable foundation of a well-maintained bridge. This intricate network raises a deeper question: what were the actual goods that made these arduous journeys so profitable, and how did they transform the ancient world? The true measure of a bridge's worth was carried on the backs of the ox carts that crossed it. Think of the sheer variety: a caravan laden with rough, grey ingots of tin from distant Afghanistan, swaying sacks of grain from the fertile plains, and elegant ceramic jars filled with deep purple olive oil from Cretan groves. Among them, a merchant might guard a small, precious pouch of lapis lazuli, its intense blue more valuable than its weight in silver. Each of these items represented a different strand in a vast, interconnected web of Bronze Age life. But one commodity stood above all others in its strategic importance: tin. This unassuming metal, often traveling thousands of miles from its only known sources, was the essential catalyst. Without it, the copper from Cypriot mines was just soft metal. Combined in a smelting furnace, they created bronze, the alloy that gave the age its name and its power. This was not a casual trade, it was a logistical necessity that entire empires were built upon. Alongside these critical raw materials moved the luxuries that defined status and beauty. Glass beads from Mesopotamian workshops, shimmering with impossible colors, were sewn into the garments of elites. Skilled artisans turned that deep blue lapis into intricate seals and dazzling jewelry, symbols of power and divine favor. Yet the bridges also bore the weight of more humble, but no less vital, goods. Bulk shipments of grain, wine, and oil were the lifeblood of growing cities, feeding urban populations and supplying the great ceremonial feasts that bound society together. The physical reality of this trade demanded incredibly sturdy construction. A single cart loaded with metal ingots could weigh as much as a small elephant, and these bridges had to support that immense weight day after day, year after year, without fail. This relentless flow of materials did more than just enrich merchants. It acted as a conduit for everything else. Potters in Greece saw new styles from Egypt and incorporated them into their own designs. Metallurgical techniques spread along the tin routes, improving the quality of weapons and tools for everyone. Even words and ideas traveled with the merchants, slowly weaving a tapestry of shared knowledge across the ancient world. The stone of the bridge may have been local, but the culture that flowed across it was truly international. That soil holds more than just stones, it holds the ghost of a crossing. An archaeologist's careful brush reveals a foundation laid 3,000 years ago, a testament to the engineers who conquered a river that has long since changed its course. At sites like the Tar Steps in England, a massive clapper bridge built of immense stone slabs, we see a construction style so primal and effective it almost certainly echoes much earlier Bronze Age designs. These are not the elegant arches of Rome, but something older and more fundamental, a direct response to the landscape's challenge. In Turkey, the remains of Hittite causeways, with their precisely fitted stone embankments, point to a different kind of sophistication, a state-sponsored mastery over water and terrain. The evidence is often subtle. Excavations along dried-up riverbeds uncover the subtle clues, the stone abutments that once anchored a wooden span, or the paved approach roads worn smooth by countless footsteps. Sometimes the most telling detail is a series of parallel grooves carved deep into the bedrock leading to the crossing. These are cart ruts, the indelible signatures of the trade that once flowed here, permanently etched by the weight of heavy laden ox carts. We can almost hear the creak of the wheels and the shouts of the drivers. Beyond the practical, these sites often held a deeper meaning. Discoveries of small votive offerings, simple clay figurines or worn coins, placed carefully near the foundations, suggest that people saw these bridges as more than just timber and stone. They were sacred thresholds, dangerous passages that required divine protection for a safe crossing. Each of these fragments, from a tool mark on a weathered block to a change in river sediment detected by modern analysis, adds a crucial piece to the puzzle. They allow us to reconstruct not just a structure, but an entire system of movement and connection. These physical traces are our most direct link to the minds of the builders, inviting us to wonder about the sheer effort and ingenuity required to raise such permanence from the earth. The tools of a Bronze Age bridge builder were extensions of his own strength and ingenuity. Picture a master craftsman, his hands gripping a heavy stone maul, patiently shaping a limestone block with nothing but repeated, precise blows. His apprentice follows with a copper chisels, its edge softer than the stone but perfect for finishing the final fit. There were no cranes, no power tools, only the fundamental physics of the lever and the inclined plane. To move a multi-ton block into place, teams of workers would have heaved on ropes made of twisted ox hide, guiding the stone up a packed earth ramp while others stabilized it with wooden levers. Every movement was a calculated risk, a symphony of coordinated human effort. Accuracy was paramount, and they achieved it with surprisingly simple technology. A long, knotted measuring cord ensured consistent dimensions, while a level was nothing more than a shallow trench filled with water, its perfectly flat surface providing an unerring reference line across any terrain. The materials themselves were dictated by the local landscape. In the forested highlands of Europe, timber was abundant for creating temporary support frameworks, while in the rocky Peloponnese, builders quarried the very limestone ridges their bridges would cross. In Mesopotamia, where large stone was scarce, they turned to the kiln, firing countless clay bricks to be stacked into graceful, durable arches. The entire process was a dance with the seasons. Construction would halt during the rainy months, resuming only when river levels dropped, revealing the rocky beds that served as natural foundations. This was not a quick endeavor. A single significant bridge could take years, even a generation, to complete. The knowledge required was not written in books but etched into muscle memory, passed from master to apprentice on the job site through gesture and grueling practice. They understood the properties of stone and the behavior of loads through experience, not equations. That a structure like the Archaeological Bridge still bears weight today is a testament not to advanced mathematics, but to an intimate, hard-won mastery of the physical world. This monumental effort forces us to ask a deeper question: what kind of society could muster the will and the resources for such an undertaking? A master stonemason did not work alone. His precision with a chisel meant nothing without the strength of hundreds. Raising a single bridge required an entire society to move in concert, a complex dance of labor and leadership that revealed the very structure of Bronze Age civilization. In powerful, centralized states like the Hittite Empire, this effort was organized with military efficiency. The state imposed a corvée labor system, a form of tax where every citizen owed a certain number of days each year to public works. A farmer might leave his fields for a season, conscripted to haul stone or build the earthen ramps needed for construction. This was not a choice, it was an obligation to the king and the gods, a direct contribution to the empire's power. Skilled artisans formed the backbone of the project. These were not common laborers but respected professionals, their knowledge of geometry and stonework passed down through generations. They were the ones who designed the arch, selected each stone, and supervised its placement, ensuring the structure's longevity. Their work was supported by a vast, unskilled workforce that quarried the stone, transported it on wooden sleds, and prepared the site. The logistical challenge was staggering. Just feeding such an army of workers required a constant stream of supplies, grain from royal storehouses, and herds of sheep and goats driven to the site. In smaller, tribal communities, the process was different but no less communal. A local chieftain or council of elders would organize the project as a collective good, a necessity for the entire village's survival and prosperity. Here, participation was still an obligation, but one framed by kinship and mutual benefit rather than imperial decree. Whether commanded by a distant king or a local leader, the act of building forged powerful social bonds. People who labored together on a project that would outlive them all developed a shared pride and a tangible stake in the structure's success. This immense investment of human effort underscores a fundamental truth: these bridges were far too valuable to be left to chance. Their existence proclaimed the authority and organizational power of the state, a power that in turn depended entirely on the stability and trade that the bridge itself provided. This deep connection between labor, leadership, and infrastructure makes you wonder, what happened when these great networks of stone and trade suddenly fell silent? A king's power was measured not just in soldiers, but in the steady clink of a bronze weight on a merchant scale. The most brilliant strategic bridge was also a permanent, highly efficient tax collection point. Royal officials would be stationed at its entrance, meticulously recording every ox cart that crossed. A percentage of the grain, a measure of the tin, or a standardized weight in silver would be extracted as a toll, flowing directly into the royal treasury. This was the political economy of the Bronze Age in action. A ruler who controlled a key bridge, like those on the Euphrates near the Assyrian heartland, held a financial stranglehold on an entire trade network. He could dictate terms, forcing rival cities to pay exorbitant fees for the privilege of moving their goods, or even block their access entirely in times of political tension. The revenue generated was immense and predictable, funding the very pillars of the state. It paid for the professional armies that guarded the empire's frontiers. It financed the sprawling palaces from which scribes administered the realm. It supplied the materials for the monumental temples that legitimized the king's divine right to rule. This created a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle. The state invested in building and securing the bridge. The bridge generated vast wealth through tariffs, and that wealth was then used to build more infrastructure and expand state power even further. The bridge was more than a crossing, it was an economic engine. Its stones were, in a very real sense, the foundation of the royal budget. This financial control was matched by an equally critical military advantage. A well-maintained bridge allowed an empire to project force with stunning speed. A rebellion in a distant province could be met not by a slow, weary march, but by a rapid, disciplined advance of chariots and infantry, crossing rivers that would have stalled a less organized force for weeks. The ability to quickly reinforce a garrison or suppress an uprising was a definitive imperial advantage. This intertwining of commerce and control meant that the collapse of a bridge's authority often signaled the collapse of the empire itself. When central power weakened and could no longer protect these vital arteries, the flow of wealth would cease and the state would begin to starve from within. The stone piers of Carchemish were not merely supports for a deck, they were the fulcrum upon which empires tilted. Straddling the upper Euphrates, this city's bridge formed the only reliable connection between the mineral-rich highlands of Anatolia and the sprawling, fertile plains of Mesopotamia. Its strategic location made Carchemish a perpetual prize, a city so valuable that the Hittites and Egyptians fought a legendary, indecisive battle in its shadow, each understanding that the true objective was not just the city walls but command of the crossing. This was not a simple trade route, it was the main artery of international commerce. Control the bridge, and you controlled the flow of Cypriot copper heading east and the vast timber shipments from the Amanus Mountains moving west. The bridge itself was a fortress. Historical accounts and excavated foundations suggest a heavily defended structure, complete with massive guard towers and reinforced gates at either end. Royal officials could inspect every caravan, extracting tariffs and denying passage to rivals. The design was a masterclass in practical engineering. Stone piers rooted deep in the riverbed withstood the powerful current while a wooden deck spanned the gaps. This wooden component was a deliberate choice, not a weakness. When the Euphrates swelled with spring meltwater, predictable seasonal floods could damage the superstructure. A stone deck would have been catastrophic to repair, but timber could be quickly and efficiently replaced, minimizing the disruption to this critical economic lifeline. The endless struggle for Carchemish, from Hittite supremacy to its later Neo-Hittite revival, demonstrates a fundamental truth of the Bronze Age. Political power was not just held in palaces or won on battlefields, it was exercised daily at the gate of a bridge. This raw economic and military power was undeniable, but it invites a deeper question. What did these stone pathways mean to the common people who crossed them? And what stories of faith and fear were etched into their very foundations? A merchant approaching a bridge did more than just check the load on his cart. He might pause to leave a small clay figurine or pour a libation of wine onto the riverbank, a humble offering to the powerful spirit of the waters he was about to cross. In the minds of Bronze Age people, these structures were sacred thresholds, dangerous liminal spaces where the human world met the untamed, divine force of the river. The physical act of crossing was intertwined with a spiritual plea for protection. Archaeologists have found evidence of this belief across the ancient world. Near Minoan bridges on Crete, small altars and deposits of finely crafted votive objects suggest these were sites of formal ritual, places where the community sought favor from the gods to safeguard their commerce and their lives. The bridge itself became a kind of altar, a permanent point of contact with the divine. This symbolic power extended even into myths of the afterlife. In Mesopotamian poetry, the journey of the soul often involved crossing a terrifying bridge, a celestial trial that separated the worthy from the damned. This was not a casual metaphor. It reflected a worldview where every physical passage mirrored a deeper, spiritual one. The construction of a bridge was therefore a profoundly religious act. Before the first stone was laid, priests would likely perform ceremonies to appease the river deity, perhaps sacrificing an animal to secure its blessing for the project. This was essential, for to build a bridge was to impose human will upon a divine entity, an act that required negotiation and respect. As epic poems and oral traditions were recited, the great bridges of the land became fixed points in the cultural landscape, their names evoking stories of heroes, kings, and gods. This dual identity, as both a feat of engineering and a vessel of belief, made the bridge the heart of a community. It was where practical necessity and deep faith converged, where the creak of an ox cart blended with the whisper of a prayer, binding people together not just by trade, but by a shared sense of place in a mysterious and powerful universe. The same merchant who paid his toll in tin also carried a cargo of ideas. While his cart was weighed down with physical goods, his mind held new concepts, stories, and techniques picked up in distant markets. A simple conversation at a bridgehead could change a local craft forever. The most transformative idea to cross these stone arches was the wheel itself, or more precisely, the spoked wheel. This revolutionary design, lighter and faster than its solid predecessor, made the war chariot a dominant force on the battlefield. But that chariot was useless if it could not cross a river. The bridges of the Near East and later of Europe had to be built with specific dimensions, their stone surfaces wide and strong enough to accommodate the precise axle width and the sudden, rapid weight of a chariot charge. This was not a coincidence, it was a direct response to a spreading technology. The bridge enabled the chariot's journey, and the chariot, in turn, influenced how future bridges were built. Metallurgy advanced in the same way. A master smith from Anatolia might share a crucial furnace design with a traveler from Greece, a technique that produced a harder, more durable bronze. This knowledge did not travel in a scroll, it moved with the people who crossed the bridges. We see the evidence in the archaeological record, where metalworking styles and alloy compositions begin to converge across vast distances, a clear sign of shared technical knowledge flowing along established routes. Even the very concept of writing, the administrative glue that held palaces together, spread across these networks. The cuneiform script of Mesopotamia and the linear B of the Mycenaeans, while different, both represent the idea of recorded information, a concept that traders and diplomats carried with them from one powerful center to another. Religious beliefs and artistic tastes were equally mobile. The distinctive shape of a temple in one city might inspire an architect in another, his plans carried in his memory across a dozen river crossings. Burial practices so deeply tied to culture show this diffusion clearly. Elaborate tomb designs and specific funeral rites appear in regions far from their origin, suggesting that these profound spiritual ideas moved with the people, finding new homes along the trade routes. Every bridge became a node in a vast, informal information network. Here, a sailor from Egypt might tell a story about his river god to a Hittite cart driver, their languages different but the core of the tale understood. This constant, low-level exchange of stories, news, and technical tricks accelerated cultural evolution at a pace never before possible. It created a surprisingly interconnected and homogeneous Bronze Age world, where a noble in Greece might wear jewelry in a style popular in Syria, and a potter in Cyprus might use a motif borrowed from Egypt. The stone arches did more than carry carts, they carried the very currents of civilization, weaving separate cultures into a shared tapestry. This constant, vital flow of ideas depended entirely on the bridges remaining open and functional, which forces a final, practical consideration. How did these ancient societies protect their vital stone threads from the relentless assault of time and water? A bridge was never truly finished. The moment its final stone was laid, a new, endless battle began against the relentless forces of water, weather, and time. A swollen spring river could slam a fallen tree into a pier with the force of a battering ram. Winter frosts would expand in tiny cracks, slowly but surely prying the most carefully set stones apart. Maintenance was not an occasional chore, it was a continuous cycle of vigilance and repair, a sacred duty passed from one generation to the next. After a major flood, a team of workers would arrive, their tools echoing those of their ancestors. They would reset dislodged stones, clear the channels of silt and debris, and reinforce the approaches scoured away by the current. This work was often organized by the community itself, a collective responsibility for a structure that ensured their collective survival. The original builders had planned for this. They selected stones not just for their initial strength, but for their ability to endure. Hard, dense igneous rocks like basalt and granite were preferred for their resistance to weathering. In their designs, we see the first glimmers of brilliant hydrological engineering. Some bridges featured triangular cutwaters, projecting structures on the upstream side of the piers. These ingenious shapes sliced the current in two, deflecting floating logs and other debris away from the vulnerable foundations, while also reducing the direct pressure of the water against the stonework. On the bridge deck itself, builders carved shallow drainage channels to direct rainwater off the surface, preventing puddles that could freeze and expand or turn the road into a muddy quagmire. In powerful empires, this upkeep was a matter of state security. Administrative tablets from the city of Ugarit detail official allocations of silver and grain to pay for the repair of a specific bridge on a royal road. A broken bridge was a national emergency, and the palace scribes tracked its status with the same urgency as a breach in the city walls. This intergenerational commitment, from the farmer clearing a blocked drain to the king funding a major reconstruction, is the real reason these structures still stand. The Bronze Age bridge was not a static monument, but a living, evolving entity, constantly renewed by the societies that depended on it. This profound investment in the future meant that a bridge could easily outlive the very empire that commissioned it, its stones remaining long after the names of its kings were forgotten, a silent testament to a system that understood the true meaning of permanence. Silence fell over the stone, the rhythmic creak of ox carts and the shouts of merchants faded, replaced by the indifferent rush of the river and the slow creep of weeds through cracked masonry. Around 1200 BC, the intricate machine of the Bronze Age world began to seize. A perfect storm of crises descended, climate shifts causing prolonged droughts and famine, while mysterious confederations known as the Sea Peoples raided coastlines, shattering the maritime trade that fed the great kingdoms. From within, internal rebellions and systemic failures further weakened the centralized palaces. As these powerful states crumbled, their most visible symbols of control, the great bridges, were among the first casualties. The royal administrators who once allocated silver and grain for maintenance were gone. The conscripted labor forces dissolved as people struggled simply to survive. Without that constant, organized upkeep, a bridge's decay was swift and certain. A single winter without repairs could see a minor crack become a structural failure, rendering the crossing impassable. At strategic sites like the Hittite capital of Hattusa, archaeologists find vivid evidence of a violent end, burnt destruction layers that suggest key bridges were deliberately sabotaged, their wooden decks set ablaze or their approaches torn down to slow an advancing enemy. In that final, desperate act, a tool of connection became a weapon of isolation. The consequences were catastrophic. A broken bridge did not just block a road, it severed an artery. Regions that once thrived on exchanged goods were suddenly cut off. A town that depended on imported tin for its bronze smiths found its supply chain severed, its artisans forced to abandon their craft. The flow of information, the exchange of ideas, the very cultural glue that had connected Egypt to Greece and Mesopotamia to Anatolia, simply stopped. The great international system, so carefully built over centuries, fragmented into isolated, impoverished local pockets. In some places, life did continue on a smaller scale. A local community might still patch the bridge they used to reach their fields or the next village, but the vision was now narrow, the ambition local. The grand idea of a road that stretched to the horizon and a bridge that connected kingdoms was forgotten, a memory fading like a ghost in the stone. This collapse reveals the profound vulnerability of an interconnected world. The very networks that brought wealth and power also created a system where the failure of one critical node, a single strategic bridge, could trigger a cascade of economic and cultural blackout. The darkness that fell at the end of the Bronze Age was not just one of forgotten kings and fallen cities, but of severed pathways. The stones remained, but the connections were lost, leaving a silent question for the ages to come. Centuries after the last Bronze Age king was forgotten, a Roman military engineer stood on the same riverbank. He examined the massive, time-worn stone footings of an ancient bridge, recognizing a solid foundation laid by a lost civilization. He did not see a ruin, he saw an opportunity. The Roman road he was building, a new artery of a different empire, would follow this exact path, and he would incorporate those old stones into his new, grander arch. This scene played out across the ancient world, from the highlands of Anatolia to the river valleys of Britain. The strategic logic of the Bronze Age planners was so sound that their crossing points remained relevant for millennia. The corbel arch, that brilliant Mycenaean invention, did not disappear. It was studied, refined, and perfected into the graceful, load-bearing Roman semicircular arch, a design that could support even wider spans and the relentless march of legions. Modern archaeology consistently uncovers this layered history. Excavations beneath a medieval stone bridge in France or an Ottoman-era crossing in Turkey often reveal the unmistakable, larger blocks of a Bronze Age foundation. The location was simply too perfect to abandon. In the British Isles, the Tar Steps, a clapper bridge of colossal slabs, was long thought to be a medieval creation. Yet its primal design and its placement on a route dating back to the tin trade suggest a much older origin, later maintained and venerated by successive generations. These structures often slipped from history into legend. A bridge that seemed impossibly ancient to an Anglo-Saxon farmer, built of stones no mortal could lift, became known as a work of giants or a gift from the gods, its true builders erased by time but its function preserved in myth. The modern rediscovery of these sites has fundamentally rewritten our understanding of the past. By mapping these bridges, archaeologists could trace the ghostly outlines of entire trade networks, proving the Bronze Age was a period of astonishing interconnection. The Roman engineer on that riverbank was not just building on stone, he was building on an idea, the enduring principle that a reliable connection is the foundation of power, prosperity, and cultural exchange outlived every empire that ever upheld it. This unbroken thread of engineering wisdom, from Corbel Arch to Roman viaduct, reveals a profound truth about human civilization. Our greatest achievements are rarely entirely new. They are very often built upon the silent, sturdy shoulders of the past. While the Hittites and Mycenaeans perfected the stone arch, a world away in the Indus Valley, engineers were solving the same problem with baked bricks and brilliant foresight. At the sprawling city of Mohenjo-Daro, their bridges were integrated into a master plan of urban plumbing. They constructed not just crossings, but entire causeways with sophisticated drainage channels running beneath them, designed to handle the violent monsoon rains that would have washed a lesser structure away. This was a different kind of genius, one that saw a bridge not as an isolated structure, but as a component in a living, breathing city. In ancient China, the challenge of wide, silt-laden rivers led to a different innovation altogether, the timber trestle bridge. Builders drove massive wooden pilings deep into the riverbed, creating a flexible framework that could withstand currents that would topple a rigid stone pier. Across the Pacific, in the high Andes, cultures developed a technology that seemed to defy physics itself, bridges woven entirely from twisted plant fibers. These suspension bridges swung precariously over mountain gorges, yet they were strong enough to support entire processions, their very design embracing flexibility over brute strength. Even the Egyptians, whose lifeblood was the Nile, participated in this global endeavor. They built few permanent bridges, not for a lack of skill, but because their rivers' predictable floods and shifting banks made ferries a more practical solution. Their advanced boat-building techniques created a floating, adaptable bridge system that moved with the water itself. Every culture faced the same fundamental obstacles: the crushing weight of a loaded cart, the destructive power of floodwaters, the sheer width of a river. Yet their solutions were a direct reflection of their environment. In Mesopotamia, where stone was rare, builders used bitumen, a natural tar, as a powerful waterproof mortar to bind their brick arches. In the rocky highlands of Greece, they needed no mortar at all, relying on the precise fit of massive limestone blocks. This was not a competition, but a chorus of different voices all answering the same universal call. The impulse to connect, to reach across a divide, was a shared human drive. The materials and methods changed with the landscape, but the underlying ambition was identical. This global tapestry of engineering makes you wonder, What were the actual substances, the clay, wood, and stone, that made these visions a tangible reality? The strength of a bridge was born from the ground itself. In a limestone quarry, workers would first heat the rock face with fire, then douse it with cold water, causing the stone to fracture along natural lines. Teams would then pry these massive blocks loose with wooden levers and copper-tipped wedges. The choice between stone and wood was never about superiority, but about survival. In the dense forests of northern Europe, timber was the obvious answer. Here, builders would drive sharpened oak pilings deep into the riverbed, creating a sturdy framework for a wooden deck that could flex with the current and the freezing winter ice. Yet even these wooden spans often rested on stone piers, a hybrid design that combined the resilience of stone foundations with the repairable nature of a timber superstructure. In the arid, rocky landscapes of the Mediterranean, stone was the only logical choice, but shaping that stone required the era's most advanced technology, bronze. A bronze chisel, though softer than modern steel, was vastly more effective than stone tools. It allowed craftsmen to dress the blocks, creating smooth, flat surfaces that could be fitted together with astonishing precision. This precise fit was the true secret to a mortarless arch, as the friction between perfectly matched stones distributed weight evenly across the entire structure. The quality of the local stone was a direct predictor of the bridge's future. A bridge built from hard, dense basalt or granite could resist erosion for thousands of years, as the Archaeological Bridge demonstrates. In contrast, a crossing made from softer sandstone or mud brick would slowly be scoured away by wind and water, its remains often lost to the river silt. Procuring these materials was a monumental logistical task. A single limestone block could weigh several tons, and moving it from the quarry to the riverbank required a well-organized system of oxen-drawn sledges, rollers made from felled trees, and packed earth ramps. In some cases, builders cleverly used the river itself, floating materials downstream on rafts to the construction site. This intricate dance between locally sourced materials and imported bronze tools created structures uniquely adapted to their environment. The physical bridge was a perfect expression of its place, a testament to how ancient engineers turned the very substance of their homeland into a pathway to the wider world. With these tangible materials in hand, one must wonder how they calculated the invisible forces of weight and thrust that would bring their designs to life. A master builder's most important tool was not his chisel, but his memory of past failures. He knew precisely how thick a stone wall needed to be to hold back earth, and exactly how much curve an arch required to keep its shape, not from a written formula, but from the stories of collapses passed down through generations. This was a science of practical experience, an intuitive grasp of physics learned through relentless trial and error. They understood compression, the immense force that pushes down on stone, because they had seen blocks crack under too much weight. They understood tension, the pulling force that can tear a structure apart, because they had watched wooden beams sag and snap. Their genius lay in designing structures that played to the strengths of their materials, putting stone, which is incredibly strong when squeezed, almost entirely into compression. The arch was their ultimate expression of this principle. They knew that the weight of the bridge and the carts upon it was transformed by the curve of the arch, channeled outward and down into the sturdy abutments on either side of the river. This simple, brilliant concept allowed them to span distances far greater than a single stone lintel could ever manage. Their mathematics were just as practical. To ensure two bridge piers were perfectly aligned across a wide river, they used long, knotted ropes to create precise right angles and triangles, applying the principles of geometry decades before Pythagoras formalized them. To keep their courses level, they used water, the oldest and most reliable level in the world, poured into a shallow trench to create a perfectly flat reference line. They even tracked the sun's shadow with a simple gnomon to orient their roads and structures for optimal sun exposure or alignment. This deep, empirical knowledge was often encoded not in textbooks, but in myths and rules of thumb. A master might teach his apprentice that the height of an arch must be 1/3 of its span for maximum strength, a golden ratio discovered through practice, not derivation. The proof of their understanding is written in the stones that remain. The Archaeological Bridge did not survive by accident. It stands because its builders correctly calculated the loads and forces acting upon it, achieving a perfect balance between weight, thrust, and strength. They solved engineering problems that would not be fully explained with mathematical theory for another 2,000 years. This raises a fascinating modern question. What can we learn about their world by listening to the echoes of the past with the tools of the present? A drone's quiet hum now maps what the naked eye can never see. It flies over a dry river valley, its LIDAR sensor firing millions of laser pulses to the ground below. The returning data strips away centuries of soil and vegetation, revealing the ghostly imprint of a causeway leading to a long-vanished crossing. This is not science fiction. It is how modern archaeology is resurrecting the Bronze Age bridge from myth into measurable fact. Ground-penetrating radar acts like an X-ray for the Earth, sending waves deep into the soil to bounce off buried stone foundations and the compacted earth of ancient approach roads. It allows researchers to map the full extent of a structure without ever lifting a trowel, preserving the site while understanding its complete design. Perhaps the most powerful tool is radiocarbon dating, applied to the smallest of clues. A tiny fragment of charcoal, perhaps from a worker's cooking fire trapped between masonry blocks, or a single preserved seed lodged in the sediment of a stone drain, can now be analyzed to give a precise calendar date for the bridge's construction. This turns a mysterious ruin into a fixed point in history. Sediment cores extracted from the riverbed nearby act as an environmental archive. By analyzing the layers of silt and pollen, scientists can reconstruct the river's historical flow, understanding how often it flooded and how its course shifted over the millennia, directly impacting the bridge's use and longevity. All of this raw data then feeds into intricate digital simulations. Archaeologists and engineers collaborate to create three-dimensional models of the bridge, then run simulations to see how it would handle the stress of a fully laden ox cart or the pressure of a 100-year flood. They can test why a specific arch shape was chosen or how a particular foundation design responded to earthquakes. This interdisciplinary approach has led to stunning discoveries. In the Armenian highlands, these very techniques uncovered a previously unknown network of sophisticated stone bridges, proving that trade routes through this rugged territory were far more developed than anyone had suspected. The analysis confirmed that these were not mere stepping stones, but expertly engineered structures with deep foundations and carefully calculated gradients. Each technological revelation adds another strand to the web, allowing us to see the Bronze Age not as a collection of isolated kingdoms, but as a stunningly interconnected world, bound together by stone and ingenuity. The same principles of load and thrust that these ancient builders mastered through trial and error are now being validated by supercomputers, creating a remarkable conversation across time that is now inspiring the bridges of our own future. The same principles that held the Archaeological Bridge firm for 3,000 years are now being studied by engineers designing for a sustainable future. A modern civil engineer sees in its stacked stones not a primitive design, but a masterclass in efficiency. Its builders used local limestone, minimizing the environmental cost of transport, and its form harnesses gravity and compression, creating immense strength without any steel reinforcement or high-energy concrete. This ancient approach offers a powerful blueprint for our own era, where reducing the carbon footprint of construction is paramount. These bridges teach us to work with the landscape, not against it. Their placements were chosen after deep observation of river patterns and geology, allowing the natural flow of water to be managed rather than conquered. Modern projects that emulate this, such as bridges with foundations designed to work with seismic activity or river restoration, are inherently more resilient. The longevity of these structures points to a different philosophy of value. They were built not for a decades-long lifespan, but for centuries, with maintenance woven into the very fabric of societal responsibility. This long-term perspective is a crucial lesson for an age often focused on short-term gains. The communal effort required to build and maintain a Bronze Age bridge underscores a truth we sometimes overlook, that the most durable infrastructure is often that which the community feels a direct stake in preserving. The adaptive reuse of their routes is another profound insight. The Romans did not ignore the perfect crossing points chosen by the Hittites, they built directly upon them. This principle of building on what already works, of layering new technology onto proven foundations, is the essence of sustainable urban planning today. The ultimate legacy of these bridges is a reminder that infrastructure's true purpose is connection. It is about creating the pathways that allow economies to flourish, ideas to mingle, and communities to thrive. In an age of climate uncertainty and resource constraints, the silent, enduring stones of the Bronze Age urge us to look beyond mere technical solutions. They challenge us to build with the same foresight, to create structures that are not just feats of engineering, but lasting gifts to the future. These stone threads wove a world together. The cumulative effect of countless bridges, from the smallest village crossing to the great span at Carchemish, was the creation of the first truly globalized economy. They transformed a patchwork of isolated regions into an integrated cultural sphere, a vast network where the price of tin in Mesopotamia was linked to the output of mines in Afghanistan. This unprecedented connectivity allowed the Bronze Age to flourish. The steady flow of goods was the lifeblood of cities, feeding their populations and supplying their artisans, while the parallel exchange of ideas accelerated progress everywhere. A new alloy formula developed in Anatolia could reach a workshop in Greece within a generation, improving tools and weapons across the entire Mediterranean. The very concept of writing, that revolutionary technology of record-keeping, spread along these same routes, adopted and adapted by palace bureaucracies to manage the complex trade that the bridges made possible. These networks fundamentally reduced the isolation of human communities. Diplomatic letters between pharaohs and kings, written on clay tablets, moved along secure, bridged roads, allowing for alliances and treaties that stabilized entire regions. In times of local famine, grain could be shipped from a surplus area to a starving one, a form of crisis management that would have been impossible without reliable overland connections. The bridges themselves were powerful symbols of this duality. In peace, they were instruments of unity, fostering cultural exchange and mutual dependence. In conflict, they became tools of control, the strategic points where an empire could levy taxes or halt an enemy's advance. The very act of building and maintaining them demanded a level of social organization never before seen. It required centralized authority, specialized labor, and long-term planning, pushing human collaboration to its absolute limits and setting a template for how complex societies could function. The legacy is etched not just in the scattered stones we find today, but in the very fabric of our shared history. These forgotten lifelines were the key to an entire era's progress, a silent testament to the enduring power of connection.